Yeah!
We here.
What up, Branch?
What up, Wells?
How's things?
Things are good. I just want to start off by saying you look particularly sharp on this episode. I like the shirt. I like the color tones. I like the hat. I like the way it goes with your chocolatey skin.
Whoa!
Yeah, come on. I let the people know. I notice things like that.
Okay.
I see all of the combinations of how they all come together to form a
thank you.
nice whole. Absolutely.
I think my wife will appreciate that. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, listen, welcome, y'all. Episode 2
Yes.
of Uncle Johnny. That's me.
And the
That's
professor.
the professor. We are dudes who are given to the things of the God of the Bible. We care very much about what his activities are in the earth, and to be able to analyze what we think we see going on, and we share that with one another. And now we've got to the point where we look to share that with you. So hope
Put
you
our
enjoy
voices
it.
in.
Yeah, put our voices
This is a
in.
marketplace of dialogue.
Yep.
It just feels like there's just this vast ocean of people with platforms and with conversations.
Yep.
We said, why not join it? So
And at some point, we will have other voices join us. We will be doing interviews, maybe some reviews, maybe some remote stuff here and there. But again, if you enjoy it, pray that y'all will hang out with us and share it with others. The more the merrier. So
the
we'll
more
look
the
to keep it
merrier.
going.
Maestro.
Hey,
yeah.
listen, man, I was thinking about something, man. Like, I think as a part of this show, we want to be an encouragement. You know what I mean? We're the old heads, and at the end of the day, we don't want to come off like the grumpy old men. Though, I don't think we would be being faithful to God to just try to always keep everything nice and cute if it's not nice and cute. If there's some issues that we're struggling with, some issues that we're lamenting over, whether in the culture or in the church, I think we should try our best to lovingly be able to talk about it. Well, I'm hoping that people would give us opportunity or listen as we dialogue about some of those things one with another. You know, I was thinking about just where things are right now, like in the church, in society, in the culture. I heard a dude on a news program say, you know, good leaders have to help people frame the stakes of the moment. You ever like fall asleep over somebody's house?
Yeah.
Like maybe y'all had a late night or I don't know what was going on, and next thing you know, like you end up at somebody's house, you don't even remember falling asleep, and you're in like their brother's room. And you wake up and you like, where am I? Like you have that, like almost
that
like that
quick-
panic. Like,
right. What?
where am I? You trying to figure it out, but you can't seem to piece it together.
Right.
And the only way that you normally come out of that to the point where you're not in this full-blown panic is the first thing you do is start tracing in the foggy recesses of your mind, what was the last thing I did? How did I? And before
What do
long,
I
usually
remember last?
what happens if you haven't been like drunk out of your mind or something you just can't remember is, that's right, I was with cruising them. And he took us on one of them excursions and I was so tired. And next thing I know, I felt, and then it all locks in for you. All of a sudden you realize, yo, that's how I got here.
Right.
Sometimes I feel like that's where we are, man, like in the culture. Like, it's not just that something happened and we fell asleep somewhere and we can't even figure out what moment are we in. Feels like a Thanos snap happened. Like, and then all of a sudden,
things started
a bunch of
away.
stuff just started disintegrating, yo. But stuff that was mad important.
Right.
And not only are we not recognizing what's disintegrating, we don't even know where we are. It's not even really living if you don't have a point of reference. Because one of the things, especially in God's economy, what happens is we start coming up with these weird views and these weird ways of how we see life. So life begins to revolve around us,
right,
and not revolve around living in light of him.
Right.
We live in light of ourselves. That's especially happens. We're just prone, and we have a proclivity to be that way if we don't have God's point of reference.
Right.
And then as I was like just journeying through the scripture, I started realizing like God seems to always do that. Like over time, God's people seem to lose their point of reference, but God through his spirit will always kind of walk us. And what he does is he takes us back and then walks us through our connection with him and what his overall plan is and what he did through his son.
Mm-hmm.
If you just think about in history, there came this point, Jesus dies and is resurrected. And all of a sudden, a new age is coming in. Here's these fearful disciples.
Absolutely.
Waiting for this promise that Jesus told them, go wait up in the upper room and you're going to be indwelt with power.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, which I thought was very interesting, something miraculous that never happened before. Cloven tongues of fire over their head. They start speaking in other languages, proclaiming the glories of God, right?
Right, right.
And immediately following that, Peter, he starts walking them through the story.
Right.
He preaches this sermon where he walks them through and brings them all the way up to the point of where they are. We're indwelled by the Spirit. This is what's happened. This is what Christ has done. And this is how it all connects.
Right.
So here we are. Now we push forward toward the age of the church.
So he actually did talk about what was going on. He said, this is not drunkenness. This is what God said would happen in Joel. Right. So let's understand what you're now, the moment you're now in. Right. Let's understand this moment in light of, like you said, how we got here.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And then if we look at Stephen in Acts chapter 7, he does the same thing.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden, there's this moment where this is supposed to actually be the end of this Jesus movement. And yet Stephen steps up and also does the same thing. He connects wherever they are right now back to historically what has transpired. Don't you understand, y'all?
Absolutely.
Like, don't you understand? This is about, and he walks them all the way up to Jesus. This is supposed to be the end, and yet they can't even take it. He preaches it so powerful, they shut their ears up and let's kill this dude.
Right.
But Stephen looks up, sees Jesus standing at the right hand of the Father. Normally we always hear seated at the right hand. It's almost like it is alluding to standing, waiting to welcome him. Confidence in that which he is saying is the truth.
Absolutely.
And yet, though it's supposed to be the end, there's another man standing there too. Yeah. Jesus is standing at the right hand of the Father.
Yeah.
And this other one who really is the one killing the Christians in the moment, he's standing there too, and he's going to become the one that not douses the flame. He's going to be the one of all the ones to carry
fan
it on.
The flame.
To fan the flames.
Go.
Amen.
Let's go.
Amen. Like, and frames the next stakes of the moment. Like, and he grabs the torch and carries it and connects. Don't you? And he knows the story. He's the master of like knowing the history.
Don't you see that
story.
in what you were going Acts 17,
and then you see Acts 17 with Paul.
Right. That's
Right. So he stands before Athens. Yeah. Right. And next thing you know, it's not just about, like we often just hear about, this is this idea where he quotes the poets and see, he was about culture and he knows how to reach people. He ain't had to do all that Jesus stuff. He just quoted it. No, he didn't. What are they reading? He does the same thing, frames the stakes of the moment. I know y'all have this frame. This is what y'all think the moment we're in. You talk about these unknown gods. Let me tell you where it's at.
A moment of religiosity.
And let me take where you are, and I'm going to connect it all the way to, he brings them all the way to the Christ, to the point where even they say, wait, we coming back. We got to hear more about this.
So,
right?
like speaking as from the professor side of things, that's what we call, especially in Christian circles, that's what we call showing people or walking through redemptive history.
Yes.
It's showing people that out of all the things that God could have allowed His Word to focus on, because
Right.
there are many things that are not in God's Word.
That's right.
But the things that we have are the things that
He
were
emphasized.
laser focused
Right.
on what He's doing redemptively in bringing and rescuing the fallen world from its fallenness,
Right.
based on the fact that it got away from His original plan and
Right.
design in
Right.
Eden.
Right.
So, like you said, this framing the moment is trying to once again talk about the moment that we're in,
Right.
in light of.
And we see life in light of Him,
Absolutely.
not in light of
And
us. And even
absolutely.
Jesus does it. Even Jesus does it in Luke chapter 24. On the road to Emmaus, has 2 disciples following him.
And there it
They
is.
don't know who He
Yes.
is. He's the redeemed. He's the resurrected Christ with them.
Right.
And they're trying to explain to Him. Don't you know what happened? They don't know.
What does He
Scripture
do?
says Jesus opening their minds
Yes.
to understand the Scriptures.
Yeah.
And then what does
Yeah.
He do? The same thing.
Moses.
Frames the stakes of the moment.
Absolutely.
Let me take you, but in order to do that, let me take you back. This is bigger than you. This is before you. This ain't about
That's good.
you.
That's good.
This is about
That's
me.
good. That's
And let
good.
me show
That's
you.
good.
Scripture says, and He takes them back to Moses and the rest of the prophets.
Yes.
And shows them where those scriptures
law.
speak of Him.
The prophets.
Yes.
Yes.
And He frames it all like, yo, don't you understand? This is all about me.
Yeah.
It's not about you. It's all, the whole Bible
Yes.
is about me.
Yes.
And so I don't know, sometimes I
Yes.
sit back, man, and I'm longing for that reframing right now. I'm longing for that. What is the point of reference? And one of the things I think I was starting out by saying is sometimes, I don't want to shy away from the controversial things, but I think I would have to say, if I could, if nobody would be mad at me as I talk with you about it, like, I feel like we lost some stuff, yo. Like I'm saying, that Thanos snap, like some stuff disintegrated. And the only way is us reconnecting ourselves to that redemptive story. And the same way they did, they refocused people on the story and brought them all the way forward to what is the relevance of Jesus right now? What is the relevance of Jesus right now? Is He just, what is He? Is He just the one who helps us, get better jobs here in America, helps push our careers along in the music industry? Or is it more about we're orbiting around Him and around His story? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I don't know, I'm grieving.
Right.
I'm grieving on that a little bit, man. I'm longing
This is
for
that drift. This is that drift that
I think, and now let me say something.
Yeah.
And I know many people may not like this, but whether it's the church or whether it's like some of the ministry or the people or the music or whoever who would say that we do this for the purpose of following in that
vein. Right.
I believe we become worldly.
I think, but
Nobody even says the word worldliness anymore. Have you heard it?
nope.
Like, think about how much the Bible talks about.
Almost, yeah.
I almost never
never
hear
hear
it.
it.
Like, there's
Never
there's not even a caution of like, be careful, because that could be, there's
Worldly.
a worldliness like that. Be quite
Nah.
careful of that.
No.
It's
Lost
like,
word.
no,
Lost-
if it's worldly,
lost
I
words.
want as much of it as I can get. Like,
Right.
and I'm not scared of it, and it won't affect me. And there's no such thing as poison.
It
Like,
could be because some people are trying to avoid the being out the world. So you know how they say we're supposed to be in the world but not of it. But some people go the other extreme. Yeah, they're out the world and not in it. You see, and so I think people don't know how to balance those two. They don't know how to be in but not of.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that that's what you're seeing, what we often see, and it's a slippery slope, isn't it? It reminds me of what has been said. It's some variation of this. I forget the exact wording, but one generation asserts the gospel. They're sure about it, and they're adamant about asserting the gospel explicitly. The next generation just assumes the gospel. They don't really, they're not adamant about making sure the gospel is asserted. They just sort of assume it. Oh yeah, we know that already. And then the next generation abandons the gospel. And before you know it, the gospel is gone. You've drifted from it. And of course, you can go even further to some people rethink the gospel claim and they'll start to deny it. So you're right. The moment, what moment are we in? And I, like you, often find myself wrestling through a melancholic disposition. You know, it's been said about the reformer Martin Luther that as he got older, toward the end of his life, he got grumpier, he got irritable. And one scholar who was sort of, reporting when he came to our seminary, Southeastern Baptist Theological, he surmised that the reason why is because he was old enough to remember seeing Reformation actually come and enjoying, basking in the beauty of the Reformation that came, but he also lived long enough to see it begin to fade, to see
It reminds me of well, I posted something on that this week, and I don't know if this is out of context, but like Haggai chapter 2, the whole I
know exactly what you mean.
Don't you remember the temple in its glory? What do you see now? Isn't it nothing? He said that,
right.
Isn't it, he made the comparison between the two and said, isn't this like nothing?
One generation
in
wept,
right?
The other generation rejoiced.
Yeah.
But it depends on what you've seen, what you've encountered. I think some would say, no, we've actually, because most people believe that they've improved on the past. It's a common misnomer to think if I go to something newer, if I go to something bigger, I'm going to something better.
Right.
And whatever was in the past, that was good and everything, but again, enlightenment. Yeah, but now we're enlightened. We used to, buy into all of that Bible stuff, but now, reason is just as good, if not better. We used to, lean on the church, but now, science kind of has that, and we used to do all of that evangelizing and all of that and trying to convert people, but now we're on the bigger and better things, just giving God glory by, just engaging people and building relationships. And so I'm like you. But I think some would say, no, we have regained our footing, that if you want to frame the stakes of the moment, this is the moment for praxis. This is the moment not for all that preaching, again, cross movement and, that era.
Can I ask you, I need to ask a question about that, though. What do you think about that statement? Because, that's one of the things that I'm saying, the snap. I watched it erode, and I'm like, but that, I don't think was ever supposed to change. So when you hear somebody say, that age of all that preaching and all that, I don't know how you divorce that from, the prescription. If somebody would believe there's a prescription for how to engage culture for Christ, that proclaiming can never go.
Right. And that's what I was about to say. I was about to say that the challenge is, if you're not careful, orthodoxy, right belief or right teaching, right convictions can never be divorced from orthopraxy, a right practice based on a right belief. They should always stay joined. Some people have gotten to the place where orthopraxy is replacing orthodoxy. Again, some assume, some even have abandoned demanding that those two always stay asserted. Assert both of them then. Don't just assume, which I think right now, this is why some people get excited when someone has the one or the other. They no longer are excited if the one that you have is the preaching. We've moved on. Snap. If you have just praxis, people will just give you credit. They'll just throw in that that praxis, that good practice that you have, that social consciousness, that social awareness, that social activism, that political activism is so the moment right now that we don't even care if you don't assert and you are not anchored in the orthodoxy. Now that may be something you would be happy for in the world, because in the world we're just happy to agree on right things, right actions. But as believers, ministers of the gospel in particular, and in the church, we never want to settle for just behavior. Right. You know, it goes back to the moral therapeutic deism, right? It's moral. You're gonna, it's right. It's based on doing good. It's therapeutic. It makes you feel good. Deism, God somewhere up there. No, we want it to be a gospel-centered, keeping what you said, the redemptive story in mind. And this moment is only the right moment, so far as it still acknowledges that this moment is being interpreted in light of God's whole history of those moments that all connect.
So that statement was, good leaders help people frame the stakes of the moment. So if that's the moment that we're in, that you just talked about, what do you think the stakes are, yo?
Yeah. I think the stakes are high because, again, the tendency is a slippery slope, is to choose one or the other. And only one gets you persecuted. And I think that's, the stakes are high because if you've noticed, this is the day where people have figured out how to avoid being persecuted, especially by the people who should be persecuting them. This is the moment where, again, that proclamation of the exclusive claims of Christ and the great wisdom of Christ, which according to Paul in 1 Corinthians 2 looks like foolish. Well, 1 Corinthians 1 and 2 looks like foolishness. So since the wisdom of Christ looks like foolishness, we just say, let's just stop talking the wisdom of Christ, because that sounds like preaching anyway. And let's just get to what the actions he wants to see. And so right now, you don't get persecuted if you say, let's go out there and let's change the world for better. Let's go out there and be positive. You get persecuted if you go out there and you demand that people submit to the Christ who makes those changes, and the Christ agenda, who sometimes will, again, take you to agenda that you think is not the agenda. If you remember, if you were going to 1 Corinthians 2, Paul says, I'm glad I didn't baptize any of you, right? Like, wait, baptism, that's part of the Great Commission, baptize. Yet he says, I'm glad I didn't baptize. He says, because I was sent to preach Christ and him crucified, right? Why, either or what, Paul? Why don't you keep those together? Because Paul was saying, hey, listen, the central piece, this proclamation piece, like I'm given to it, but there are those who are given to the baptism. If we stay together, if we're together, now we're covering all the bases. Go ahead, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, it's interesting you highlighted 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and 2. That has been an anchor for me.
Excellent.
For anybody who's saying that they are out to engage the culture for Christ, I think Paul lays it out. And just like you said, I think he also goes further to contrast when we get to that point where we have these other things other than what God has told us to trust in, the proclamation of the message of the cross, we actually end up with worldly wisdom. Which he says, don't tell me that. Nobody has ever come to know God by worldly wisdom. He crushes it. Like, don't even tell me all this special stuff. You're going to tell me all this, oh, we did this technique, or we ain't had to do that. We made it so they didn't consider us to be foolish.
Absolutely.
Worldly wisdom. And I always say to people, like, listen, if you're looking to engage the culture, if there's this, let's just say the culture is right here and there's the crowd. Before you open your mouth, the crowd is divided and it has nothing to do with you. Paul says it's those who count it as foolishness if you're going to preach the message of the cross or proclaim the message of the cross, and it's going to be those who count it as, those who count it as foolishness, and some that will see it as the power of God.
Absolutely.
It has nothing to do with you. But that's our thing. We start trying to figure out that's the biggest issue. How can we make them, we've watched it. We've watched people try to engineer, how do I make more of them not counted as foolish? How do I turn the foolishness down so that they like it more? And what they end up doing is jettisoning the message of the cross in order to do it. But you know the amazing thing Paul says is, we keep talking about culture engagement. Here he has two cultures that he's reaching out to.
Right.
One of them says, oh, the Jews, they want a sign. Mm-hmm. The Greeks, they want wisdom. Mm-hmm. Paul doesn't say, okay, I got to engineer fix. He says, you know what? Mm-hmm. And one's a stumbling block to one, and one's foolishness to the other. And guess what I did? I gave both of them the same thing. I gave them the very thing I keep telling y'all. I gave them Christ and him crucified.
Foolishness to them, stumbling block to them.
But somehow we come into our modern era and feel like we're going to figure it out. We're going to do it differently because we make these statements. They don't want that. Here's the catchphrases. They don't want that, or we'll reach more. And I think we end up doing something terrible, man. And so I think that's what I'm talking about is like, and then we end up losing ourselves. We don't have a point of reference. We don't understand, like, don't we realize God, this is immutable. He's done this all the way through. He's never, why is he going, he's not doing it different because it's your era.
Absolutely.
Regardless if you say, but they don't want it. They never wanted it. That's the lie. You keep talking about they don't want it that way. They never wanted it.
Right.
Even when he was here.
Right. Well, early back in the 90s when we were first trying to figure out, like what was the landscape for us, the looking on the secular side, as though it were, just looking in pop culture, hip hop made it clear that Christ was not wanted, that his redemptive story was not wanted, that it was not going to be a sellable. I remember somebody, when you were about to get that record deal, and who was it that told you, we were in the era of Naughty by Nature. Tommy Boy. I thought it was Tommy Boy. And Tommy Boy was basically saying,
he's too clean. He's too nice.
He's too clean, nice. And I remember it was at that time that Bad Boy Entertainment was popular. You named your entertainment company Bad Boy because to be bad was in. Naughty by Nature. I recognize I'm naughty by nature, now let me turn from it. It was, I'm happy to be this way. Right. And so I remember in that time, people were basically like, we can't be so cross-focused, cross-centered, because this is the era where people don't like all the squeaky cleanness. Right. Let's make much of our unworthiness too, our sinfulness. But again, instead of talking about it as the thing that we turn from, it became the meeting place. And before you know it, we just stayed there. And so, but now if you fast forward, I think that people it's a whole new cycle of people who say, once again, that gospel, that foolishness is just that. We've tested it. It is foolishness to some. It's a stumbling block to others. What can we give them that won't be that? And I personally believe that we're back to the era where some of the justice talk can sometimes be a replacement for the gospel, because since justice, a lot of people feel like justice is tethered to the gospel. They figure like if I talk justice, I can get credit for also talking gospel. Right. But once again, does there come a time where you say, it's only gospel when it's gospel? Right. So let's talk about how the gospel, like you said, frame the moment, how the moment of yearning for justice has a gospel answer to it. And again, there are many people who give people credit for talking gospel, or who partner with people who are specialists in justice talk, even though they're enemies of gospel talk. Again, you got to look at it in, how many times have we seen people, drift? How many times have we seen artists seem to be more exuberant about secular and godless artists who are speaking the same social talk? Right. But those same people would be hostile to the same gospel talk. And even when they say I'm into the same gospel, they don't talk that gospel. Right. They just say I'm into the same gospel. And so, this is some of the ways we see it show up.
Man, I think if you look at the issues today, again, not pointing at any one thing, but just looking at what's swirling. You don't even have to look for it. It's just out here in the air.
Absolutely.
Like, the real issue is, especially what has transpired in America, is I think there was evil. there's this idea that there needs to be justice.
Yeah.
What often gets dropped is this idea of forgiveness. And then lastly, this issue of love, right? But the truth is those 4 elements only find their true convergence at the cross. That's exactly what happened. There was an evil done.
Absolutely.
God was out for justice.
Absolutely.
But yet gave us forgiveness and a demonstration of his love. That's where it is. And I think, I'm not trying to give a pat answer. I'm not one of the just preach the gospels guy, but I'm not going to shrink back from the gospel.
Right.
But I am saying this is where it is. We have to labor. We need more energy and more labor on that fact and that proclaiming that to all that is going on and all that is swirling, because I do think that there's a balm, man. There's a healing balm in the cross, man. For sure. Right.
Yeah.
And I know how that sounds. People are, he oversimplifies. No, you might as well jump over there with the just preach the gospel camp. I'm not saying that.
Right. Oh, no. Facts. But again, like you said, what we're talking about is the moments and the stakes, framing the moment. Yeah. But do you agree that from in your world, what is, because again, I'm only saying that I sense that in this moment, that is the moment. I mean, again, I've looked at a gazillion conferences.
We can't deny it.
I listen to all the messages. I look at all the blogs. I look at all the books that's coming out. And what you notice is that is the moment. And some people would say we haven't drifted. We haven't lost anything. We're actually recovering what we've lost. Like they'll say that old was missing this. So that's why I say, I'm not so sure that this is being presented as the addendum, because if it is, I think we're failing to continue to assert what was, because there are people who, again, they not only forsake, or they not only pivot from where it was, they actually denounce where they used to be.
Right.
They find all reasons to get away from it. Sometimes they say, well, I didn't really believe it. Or, at the time I was just beating people over the head, or I was just, they basically, stereotype that era that we're talking about, where God did something through wanting to emphasize this within the urban context. And they basically speak almost negatively about that. That was when I was immature. That's when I had to move on.
I think that is very satanic in my mind. Only because in the same way that, you remember when Jesus healed Lazarus? Brought him back to life? And then it says, and then they plotted to kill Jesus. Because of this, people are believing. Well, guess what? Shortly after that,
excellent.
It says now we're going to plot to kill Lazarus again. Right. Because of him, people are going. So when you say that, I believe that Satan has somehow deceived people to say they have to kill that thing that was once spoken, because that thing still got people believing.
Right.
It's still got rippling effects where people are coming to Christ as a result of what happened through that. So in the same way, don't just kill Christ, kill his witness.
Right. Excellent. Because if you believe in the greatest, the most woke message of all, if you believe in the greatest social, remedy for social ills that a person can articulate without articulating it being rooted and found in Christ and in him crucified. If you won't, in other words, Satan would not attack it.
Right.
Because you won't come to belief.
The biggest
you won't come to belief.
That he's attacking is
what will lead you to put faith in Jesus Christ. Like you said,
kill Lazarus.
Kill Lazarus, because people are believing in this Jesus because of him.
Right.
Kill the emphasis of yesterday when people were beginning to were believing in him. And some people, again, so again, I want to affirm that it is possible, like you said, to just preach and fail to show how right preaching leads to a certain kind of right praxis. But again, it so often feels like we're switching one for the other.
And what are we saying? Let's be fair too, because I think sometimes I hear this in the comments and the blogs from our brothers and sisters who are out here being faithful.
Absolutely.
In their churches, in CHH,
Absolutely.
in their community, proclaiming the gospel and catching all kinds of trouble as a result. And they're like, we don't get enough credit. All y'all do is complain about nobody's doing it. I am doing it, but y'all don't ever I never get encouraged.
Absolutely.
I want to encourage them now to stand firm and continue.
Yeah.
Like this is not some kind of like trying to lambaste them.
Yeah.
But it is us like trying to reason and make an appeal to the body that we gotta stay the course, y'all. Stay the course. Like Paul did. Oh, you want to reach him? Don't come up with your own stuff. One's gonna say they want a sign. One's gonna say they want wisdom. One's gonna say, give me hot lyrics. Another one's gonna say, give me hot beats. Another one's gonna say, yeah, give me certain aspects of making my life better here on earth and in America.
Sermons.
Right, exactly. Right. And Paul says, I gave them both the same thing, which was, again, we said this wasn't what they wanted, but to the one that wanted wisdom, it is the wisdom of God. One that wanted a sign, Jesus is the only sign you're going to get. You know what I mean? The resurrection.
Let me dip to the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, in the book of Judges, the story of Gideon. In the story of Gideon, the Bible says that basically that Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. So God gave them over to the hand of Midian. They were oppressed and they cried out. Now immediately in the context of oppression and in the context of being delivered over and in the context of all of this, now again, the parallel is not completely synonymous because somebody could say our oppression wasn't because of our sin, directly. But just the context is oppression. The context is I want out of this, and God sends a prophet, right? And the prophet begins to preach. Once again, all the commentaries, if you look, or many of the commentaries note that we would have just liked a deliverer, not a preacher. But God sends a preacher, and the preacher basically tells them that I've done my part. I've been faithful. Once again, the redemption. I'm the God who brought you out of Egypt. I told you that when you come to the land that I was going to deliver, but you've been attached to the cultural idols. It turns out that Israel, in that case, had failed to drive out the cultural idols, the people, and he says their God will be a snare to you. Their gods will be a snare to you. Now you will basically want what they want. You will do what they do. Yep. And that got them, that was in chapter 2, and that got them on a this journey where they continue to live in the land but fall into the sins of the time and the culture. Again, my only connection is when they wanted deliverance, God still sent them that framing of, let me take you back to what I've done, what I've been doing. This is the time where I remind you that this is all about the covenant. This is all about being rightly related to me and what I'm doing. So fast forward. This is the era where whatever the times are, whatever the times call for, they always call for a reminder, a regurgitation of, and a reflection on the fact that redemptive history is now. We're still inside of it, redemptive history. So what are we asking for that, and how does it relate to what he's doing? Now, let me transition. There's been a lot of talk about that evangelism was never supposed to be the end. There's several, especially black intellectuals have been noting that there is a cosmic relationship, that this thing is bigger than just going out and evangelizing, which it may, for some may sound like all we're saying is let's evangelize. What about bringing cosmic restoration and liberation?
So is this like redemption of all creation type?
Right. Okay. There's some who would say you all are what they call Great Commission Christians. You think that the church is supposed to go out there and just evangelize. But I think that, once again, what is the moment? Is this the moment of great liberation, or is this the moment of great commission? And are those two opposed to one another, or are those two actually related to one another? And the question, if so, how? Now that might kind of sort of throw a monkey wrench in what we're talking about, but since we're talking about the moment, some have said that this is the moment of pressing for the liberation of, again, things.
How do you feel about that? Because I want to like clarify, make sure you
Okay.
get a chance to not be misunderstood. Like, so you talked about oppression. You talked about oppression of Israel. You may have
Right.
made reference and application to some of what we may have gone through. Are you saying, what's the big hubbub? God's people have been oppressed in times past too. So what are y'all fighting for? What do you want?
Right. Well, again, I'm just really just trying to look at the times, what others are emphasizing as this is the moment, which explains why all of our books, all of our conferences, and all is a hyperbole, but like so much attention is being devoted to this. And what I'm saying is, and they also probably think that the news media is focused, a string of killings and the woes of the black and brown communities have really been on the lips of politicians and on the lips of preachers, and all kinds of woes and tragedies make this a ripe time to specialize in the praxis side and on the liberation side and on the redemption, like something beyond evangelism side. Is this not you know people like you keep lamenting the drift from when we were just proclaiming Christ and somebody would say this time is ripe for now. That's why we're on this. Well, I'm only saying that that the explicit, what I was saying is I'm a champion for, and I'm an advocate for, and I'm expectant. I live and expect with expectancy for a day when the groans of this current earth, the groans of this current time are satisfied. The weeping turns to joy when the shackled and the oppressed are liberated. I'm for that. I'm even for working toward that. What I would say to that is, but the question is how.
Right.
So, and we may differ here. Not only you and I may differ here, but the going conversation. How did Jesus bring loose Lazarus from the grave? He said, Lazarus, come forth. You see? So there's this joint, this strong word. Like, in other words, with the power of Jesus through a strong word, Lazarus comes out, right? How does God transform a broken society? That's the question. Does he do it through your sweat equity, or does he do it through the sweat equity rightly placed and positioned? So in other words, let me give you an example. God said, I am come down to deliver Israel. Moses, you go and say, Pharaoh, let my people go. In other words, I'm sending you to deliver Israel. Wait, I'm delivering Israel. I'm sending you to deliver Israel. How do I deliver Israel? By going and saying, and then it was just a string of going and telling Pharaoh what God said. And then God actually comes in and actually flexes the muscle to make it happen. Well, if, my wife, she bakes. My wife, if she gathers her daughters together and says, I'm baking a cake. I have a cake to do. She has a business. I'm baking the cake. She says, you give me bowls and ingredients. You grease my sheets. You set the timer. In other words, I'm baking the cake. What I told you to do is the role you play within me baking the cake, right? I believe that what God has done is there are explicit imperatives. There are things that God has told the church to do because there's something he is doing. And I think according to Colossians, he is bringing about cosmic redemption. That he is releasing the earth from its groans. Romans says that the earth groans and is waiting for the manifestation of liberated people. But who's liberating those people? It is Christ still who is the one who brings Lazarus forth. It is Christ who brings people from their spiritual bondage, and that spiritual bondage also manifests itself in earthly loosing, right? So what I'm suggesting with all of this is that I think the reason why so many of us seem so adamant about the Great Commission as one of the primary imperatives that we go out to say, I know I'm supposed to do this. Like, I know I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to go out and make disciples. And even that is not just evangelizing. Because the Great Commission is not go and evangelize.
It's teaching them to obey.
It's teaching them to observe all that I command, right? So part of all that I command means that we go out and we give ourselves wholly to, again, to the other aspects of societal involvement. So in other words, I think we are involved. I think we go out and we participate. And I think we all go out and we participate in ways that brings Christ to bear on our context. So in other words, I think it's a both and. I don't think you vilify Great Commission. And I don't think that you deny that we're supposed to be socially engaged.
Right.
I just think that, I always think that the times almost seem like we are making people feel bad because of their emphasis is on one thing or another, when I think we ought to continue to proclaim that the emphasis is on both and. It's on both and.
Yeah.
But there's one thing, right, that you can aim with, and the other naturally flows out of it. But the same is not true in reverse,
Other way.
right?
Yeah.
So Jesus says basically, you can't love God, well, John, but you can't love God. I mean, you can't say you love your brother if you don't love God, right? I mean, you can't say you love God and not love your brother, right? But it is possible to love your brother and not love God. So in other words, love God and love for brother should rightly follow. Right? Matthew 25, people talk about the things that mark the true believer. You visited me when I was in prison. You visited me when I was sick. When I needed water, you gave me a cup. You know, what you did to the least of these, you did to me. Well, we know that's not just generically true. You don't just go to prison ministry and, you know, feed the homeless and help people give out water bottles and you automatically are saved by that.
Right.
That's the evidence that the first thing has happened first.
The effects of the gospel.
Those are effects. So I think that, like, again, and I hope this is clear, because keeping this within the frame of, if Thanos snapped and something has disintegrated, what? I think it's the right relationship of those two. But my point is, but I hear people assuming, other people have abandoned, but some are assuming that when we're talking this one, what flows out of the gospel, what flows from it, we're automatically talking gospel. I do not think that's true.
Yeah.
I think when you're automatically talking gospel, you then can talk about, if you're rightly talking gospel, these things flow out of it. Some people look to history and they say, well, there are many people who taught the gospel and those things did not flow out of them. Well, the Bible would question how well they knew the gospel. And then there are times when people who know the gospel, because of sanctification is a process.
Right.
Think about some of the most world-class, solid Christian racists are not just, again, the original founders of America. Let's go back to Peter. Let's go back to Peter, who was racist,
Right.
you know, who just had that inclination to let segregation remain because he was being out of step with the gospel, even though he knew the gospel. You know, so in other words, we have others. Acts 6, the church at Acts 6. We believe it's the same church that sold all they had, so everyone could have what they had in common in chapter 2. Then by the chapter 6, the Hellenists and the Hebrew widows were being treated disproportionately. You see, by the time you get to Acts 15, you've got to have a whole council, because there was a division between, what does it mean? How Jewish do you have to be in order to be included in the church? Once again, these are by people who up until that point were part of that church that was growing in strength, that had seen the favor of God. In other words, it's possible to know the gospel and there be a breakdown in the social outworking of it, not justifying it, just saying that's possible.
Right.
Some people will deny that you know the gospel when the social is not there. They'll say, you don't know the gospel? No, it's possible to break down in where do we go from here? But the flip is not true. You don't just automatically know the gospel just because you do the right social things.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you say something. I want to confess something, and you might have to correct me or slap my hand on this one, and this is going to be crazy. But Let me start by saying, like, I got a good friend that you know, Howard Brown, Pastor Howard Brown. One of the things I admire about Howard, and I've watched him over time, not that, none of us are perfect. Howard would confess that he's not. But one of the things I do appreciate about him is his wrestling to be self-aware. Like, there's times when I watch him go through something as a pastor, and he'll be the one to first say, you know what? I might have to check my heart. Has my heart drifted? Like, have I become susceptible to some things that have kind of drawn me? And just his humility, his ability to consider that, like, I value that. And I said, you know what? I got to make sure I add that as a component that I always do, right? So as I've been thinking about all that we are talking about, all the stuff that swirls, and then I have to couple that with, there's another side that we haven't put a lot of weight on, even though you've acknowledged it, is our place and our history in America has beat us down. Like, I'm not sure, are you beat down? Like, I resonate with people who are bubbling over with, I'm fatigued with all this. I'm tired of all this. I can't watch another black man get shot down in the street. I can't keep watching all this stuff happen, and this keeps happening to us century after century. And then I think there are those moments, and this is what's crazy, and maybe I'm off here, is if I examine my heart, I hear a grumble in my heart. In light of the fact that how I'm susceptible because I'm tired and my defenses are down. And if I'm not careful, I hear my heart like, I said, what you say? Crucify him. Because I believe even in that day and age, there were some who were like, if he's not here to get Rome off our neck,
go ahead and
crucify him. Because we're tired of this.
Right.
And just the emotional wear and tear of, like, we live in this. And if he's here, if he's the one, John said it. I mean, yeah.
Right.
If he's the one, go ask him, is he the one? Or should we be looking for somebody else? Because I'm in here, and if he the one, why am I in here? Go tell John what y'all see.
Excellent point.
You go tell him what you see. Oh, the blind see, the deaf hear, and the gospel's being preached.
Right.
And tell him, blessed is the man who's not offended by me. Excellent. So if I choose to leave you in jail, because I'm God, I am the one. I already proved that by the word you just heard. Blessed is the man that's not offended by me. John never gets out.
And set the liberties set the captive free, and yet he left John in. So that goes to show you.
Never gets out.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that means we should just endure racism.
Right.
But I'm saying, like, man, I gotta watch my heart. Like, excellent. I do get drawn into the emotionalism of, and before I know it, maybe my heart is actually saying in its own language, crucify him, man. Like,
crucify him.
Or maybe I get the other emotional tug and I say, the other option, which was, forget this, we gotta do something. By any means necessary, by our own hand, give us Barabbas. Because I wanna be a revolution, I wanna be a part of the, like, we gotta do something. Give us Barabbas instead.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. I don't get it twisted. I'm just as emotionally invested, just as grieved. You know what? One of the things about me is, we talk about this movement, and seeing a movement that seems like overwhelmed with the Lord Jesus Christ to the point where they can't shut up about it, right? Come, and the snap, and something disintegrates. And some of what disintegrated was our own community, where we felt like we could look around and we could get the benefit of the doubt from others. That if we stay together, we could face this moment together. And it feels like, again, in that switcheroo, no, we can't do this together because you still, to us, are the former. It's time for the latter. And instead of saying, yes, but remember, the latter must always remain connected to the former. No, you're part of the former, and we've switched from the former to the latter. And so now you're irrelevant. You're irrelevant to the moment right now. We like all the people who are, again, not still doing that, who are doing this now. But we're like, no, we're still the people who believe you should still be doing this and that.
Right.
Like, why are we not allowed to do this and that?
Right.
Again, so what I'm saying is, I thought that this would be the time where there would be community. So I was looking around at, let's work through this together. But instead, it feels like sometimes I'm just alone. I feel alone in this era where what SNAP was also the community of people where if I come to the table with the robust gospel, I've always come to the table. Right. That's not a bad thing.
And this isn't new. Even what we're saying today is what we said 20 years ago. So
right.
Please don't get mad at me. Am I allowed to reinforce what I said 20 years ago? I'm not coming with no new attack or nothing. I'm saying what I've always said.
Right. And I think these are the times when the glory of what we say as a collective was going to be one of the primary witnesses. Yeah. One of the things I say often, when you look at the New Testament church, which was a people who did not have the social standing to be able to just walk around with their chest out like life is as we demanded. Of course, there's no democracy in the New Testament. Israel themselves so the Lord Jesus himself as a Jew would have been born under Gentile oppression. When you think about how he told, if somebody asked you to go a mile, go 2. Often the Roman soldiers would be the one who would take advantage of their ability to take advantage of you. The centurions, the tax collectors were often both Rome and Jews who overtaxed you. Jews who got the chance to take taxes for Rome and would exploit you. And so whether you were being exploited by the system run by your own people, or whether you were being exploited by the system of Rome, which was the Gentile oppressor of the Jewish people, the Lord Jesus would say things like, walk 2 miles. If somebody wants your cloak, that's taking advantage of me. He said, give them your tunic too. Your coat too. You talk about when John the Baptist was like, hey, what's going on? It was right after he heals a centurion servant and the widow of Nain's son.
And it's basically got back to him.
You're doing good to the people that's doing bad to us.
I'm in here. Right.
Well, it's not just he's bringing back to life. You're bringing back to life the people who you're supposed to be judging. Right, because he had told them the axe is at the root. He's coming to bring judgment. Of course, he's going to judge the people who are worse than us. But he didn't. He did something good to them and left his people in that position, which means that we need to reevaluate what he's doing in the sequence and how they relate. All I'm saying is, I feel like, and I'm keep going back to the disintegration of not only lost concepts, lost affections, lost ambitions, lost mission, but a lost community because those things were lost. And so I hate when people act like they're more passionate about these things than I am because they still typecast me as, oh, you're evangelizing, you're for the church, I'm for this. And I'm like, no, I'm with you, I'm for that. But the Father says that if he's baking the cake, he did tell me, get the pans. And if I'm getting the pans, he told me to get the ingredients. Well, depending on what, the imperatives you find yourself grinding hard. Let me say one more thing. Can I say one more thing real quick about that? And I know our time is coming to a close, but maybe I'll save this for another one. But just know on the next episode or on future episodes, I want to get into how I believe that the moment that one of the primary tools that God has given the church to bring about the social change that we know America in particular and other societies need is that the church needs to be able to model how itself does the things that the country then should do. So in other words, if the country is divided, the church should show how it's not divided. If the country is unfair to the low man on the totem pole, then the church should be about lifting up the low people in the church. See, the church sometimes wants to also go out into the low people in the streets, while it is very dismissive of the low people in the church. You know, that James 2. So like, sit at my feet, you don't have nothing to offer.
Right.
But then you go on the block and you are nice to the low man out there, as though Christ sent you out there to fix society and ignore the fact that you haven't even fixed your own community. Again, Acts 6, it's do something about the segregation, like the disenfranchisement in your own community. That will be one of the primary tools to help Rome to realize that, again, that inequality should not be tolerated. Philemon, if you want to look at a Rome that's into slavery, how about you do something different with Onesimus, your brother? You know, so these are the types of things I think Peter, the apostle, you're withdrawing from the table, Galatians 2, from Gentiles. So you're basically saying that y'all are not unified. How you going to blast Rome for not promoting unity if you're not even being unified? And now look into today's church, gospel-centered church. We're fighting amongst whites and blacks. We're fighting amongst, again, this one and that one. And it's like, how are you going to tell America that it should be advocating reconciliation if you will admit you can't achieve reconciliation as the church, the Holy Spirit-filled church?
So we're going to separate.
Right. And again, so we're going to kick you out and we're going to move on. And so we're going to, you know, our relationships, that was just for a moment. Now we're on to new relationships. Well, then how are you getting mad at America when they say, look, we did all we need to do, we're on to the next thing? So again, we didn't really plan on talking about this.
We didn't. That just kind of leaked in there.
Right. Framing the moment, because there's so many moments.
Yeah, it is.
I want to get back to that worldliness and some other things that we've lost.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
So we'll close out this one. Thank y'all again for hanging out with us. Again, our prayer is that you would consider the things we say, that you would not just take us at our word. We don't look to be any kind of charismatic or use any kind of charisma or power to try to make you think that what we say is true. We say the things that we consider, the places that we cited in the scriptures, go back and look at them for yourself. Pray and ask the Lord to show you if you too may resonate with some of the things that we say and they're true. Ask the Lord about, what to do about those things. So as our custom in terms of closing out, we give a Benny. Now unto him who is able to bring unity in the body and be able to reconcile us to himself
and to each other.
And to each other. To that day when we'll all be before him, every race, every creed, every tongue. We look forward to that day. To him be both glory, power, dominion, honor, both now and forevermore. Amen. Peace, y'all.
Peace.